In today's video, we are going to look at the 6 most stupid Grand Canyon deaths ever recorded. From a swimmer ignoring river safety warnings and stripping off his life jacket, to a man showing off his stunts at an engagement party, ending the night in the dumbest way possible. It was October 14th, 2018. The north rim of the Grand Canyon stretched into darkness as a 32-foot rented recreational vehicle inched backward toward an unguarded cliff edge, its reverse lights casting white beams into empty air where solid ground should have been. Randy Forster, a 55-year-old insurance adjuster from Columbus, Ohio, had spent 3 decades behind a desk processing claims. His wife Sheila, 53, worked part-time at a local credit union. Neither had ever driven anything larger than their Honda sedan before renting the RV for their anniversary trip. They chose the North Rim specifically for its reputation as less crowded than the South Rim, hoping to capture sunset photographs from Cape Royal Road's scenic pullouts despite signs at the road entrance warning that vehicles longer than 22 feet were not permitted. They arrived at the Cape Royal area just after sunset, realizing too late they'd miscalculated the drive time. Randy wanted to turn around at a narrow pullout approximately 800 feet from the main parking area, rather than continue forward in unfamiliar darkness. The pullout measured roughly 40 feet wide, with no guardrails or barriers clearly marking where the pavement ended, near the canyon's 200-foot drop. North Rim pullouts were designed decades earlier for standard vehicles, not modern RVs exceeding 30 feet in length. In darkness, the visual distinction between solid ground and void disappeared entirely. The RV's large blind spots made Sheila almost invisible in the mirrors until the vehicle's rear wheels were already on loose gravel. At 7:45 in the evening, Randy began his 3-point turn. Sheila stood outside the passenger door, attempting to guide him, using hand signals barely visible in the RV's side mirrors. Her voice carried warnings, but Randy, plausibly concentrating on maneuvering, likely could not hear her over the engine and the wind. A motorcyclist traveling southbound stopped his bike approximately 50 feet away, keeping his headlight aimed at the scene to provide additional illumination. He later told investigators the RV's positioning concerned him immediately. Randy pulled forward, angling the vehicle's nose toward the road. He shifted into reverse, checking his passenger mirror where Sheila stood waving her arms. The rear wheels slipped instantly on loose gravel at the pullout's boundary, causing the back end to pivot downward. The ground beneath the rear wheels gave way instantly, and the vehicle's back end dropped, its frame pivoting downward at a steep angle. Sheila, standing directly behind the passenger side, had no time to move. The descending RV's rear corner struck her torso with devastating force, sweeping her over the edge. The 12,000-pound vehicle tumbled end over end down the rocky slope. Metal tore against stone, shattering windows and collapsing the roof structure. Randy instinctively braced for the turn, but his weight threw him against the disintegrating interior as the RV rolled violently, glass shredded upholstery and flesh alike. The vehicle completed 2 full rotations before sliding another 30 feet, finally stopping on a flatter shelf 200 feet below the rim. Sheila's body came to rest 40 feet from the wreckage, wedged between 2 boulders where the initial impact had thrown her. Emergency crews from the ranger station arrived in 22 minutes, following the motorcyclist's call. Both victims were pronounced deceased at the scene. The medical examiner's report listed Randy's cause of death as multiple blunt force trauma, including severe head injuries and internal bleeding. Sheila died from massive thoracic crush injuries and traumatic asphyxiation. Her chest cavity collapsed from the RV's initial impact. Recovery crews removed the wreckage 3 days later using heavy recovery equipment. Existing advisories at the site had warned only against off-trail hiking, not oversized vehicle maneuvers. Following the incident, park officials reviewed safety signage, though no physical barriers were installed. It was April 18th, 2015. Along a remote section of the Grand Canyon's south rim, a limestone edge jutted over a 400-foot vertical drop into the canyon below, and Tyler Cassian was about to perform his last stunt. The engagement party had been going smoothly until the 26-year-old decided the weathered rock would make a perfect stage for what he did best. Tyler had built a modest following in Las Vegas, performing urban parkour. His social media showed him vaulting concrete barriers, scaling parking garages, and jumping between rooftops in the downtown arts district. He worked nights as a casino floor supervisor, training during the day at a local gymnastics facility where he'd refined his technique for 3 years. Friends described him as confident to the point of reckless, someone who never turned down a physical challenge. He'd driven up from Vegas specifically for his college roommate's engagement celebration, arriving that morning with his signature wrist guards and grip-enhanced shoes. Tyler had no experience with natural terrain. His world was concrete, metal, and predictable surfaces. The Grand Canyon's south rim is carved from kaibab limestone, a sedimentary rock that weathers unevenly, creating deceptive footholds and surfaces that can crumble without warning under sudden pressure. The private gathering of 18 guests had just finished the engagement toast when Tyler spotted a gap between two rock formations roughly 8 feet apart, positioned directly above the sheer drop. The morning dew hadn't fully evaporated, leaving a thin moisture layer on the stone that wasn't immediately visible. A bridesmaid, in a coral dress, stood 12 feet away, champagne glass still in hand. As Tyler announced he wanted to show everyone something cool, he didn't test the surface, didn't check for loose rock or grip quality. Tyler simply backed up 15 feet, stretched briefly, and committed to a hurried running approach toward the gap. 3 other guests had their phones out, anticipating another one of his viral-worthy performances. Tyler's approach was textbook perfect, his form identical to dozens of successful jumps captured on video back home. But limestone isn't pavement. His left foot planted on the edge for launch, and the moisture-slicked surface provided zero friction. His shoe slid outward violently, and his body pitched forward over the rim at a high but slightly cautious speed. The bridesmaid's scream cut through the celebration as Tyler disappeared. His body struck a couple of protruding rock formations during the initial descent, each impact breaking additional bones and tearing tissue. His trajectory was unpredictable, and he finally came to rest on a narrow ledge about 200 feet below the rim, wedged between some boulders. Multiple people at the party called 911. Park rangers reached the remote section of the south rim 18 minutes later, carefully making their way along a narrow maintenance trail. From the rim, they could see Tyler's body resting on a ledge far below. The medical examiner's report documented massive blunt force trauma to the chest and head, multiple fractured vertebrae, and severe internal hemorrhaging. Death likely occurred within seconds of the first impact. The engagement party disbanded quietly. Most guests left within the hour, the celebration irreversibly shattered. Park officials recovered Tyler's specialized parkour shoes and wrist guards from his body, meaning that he had likely planned a stunt in advance. The incident was logged in the park's records as an accidental death by fall, one of several fatal falls reported along the canyon's rims that year. Tyler's family declined to speak publicly about the tragedy. It was April 22nd, 2017. The south rim of the Grand Canyon stretched under cloudless Arizona skies, concealing dangers that would claim a life before the day ended. Paul Detweiler, a 39-year-old insurance adjuster from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, stood at the edge of an unmarked trail, his brand new hiking boots still stiff from the box he'd opened 2 days earlier. Paul wasn't an experienced hiker. His outdoors resume consisted of forum posts claiming expertise and a few YouTube videos he'd watched the night before. Friends described him as overconfident, the type who researched topics online, then proclaimed himself knowledgeable. He discovered an unofficial overlook mentioned on hiking forums, where users repeatedly warned about unstable ledges and dangerous conditions requiring technical climbing gear. Paul apparently dismissed these warnings, posting that he could handle it without ropes like a pro. His only preparation was reading internet threads and packing a backpack with water and snacks. The backpack weighed approximately 28 pounds and contained no safety equipment. That morning, Paul began his descent along a narrow limestone ledge, approximately 250 feet below the rim. The Grand Canyon's layered rock formations drop 6,000 feet in places, with sedimentary limestone particularly prone to crumbling under pressure. His untested boots pinched with every step as he navigated the roughly 250-foot-long ledge carrying his overweight pack. An experienced backcountry hiker moving along the canyon wall noticed Paul immediately, observing his reckless movements with growing concern. Paul hopped over loose rocks without testing them, occasionally pressing footholds with one finger before committing his full weight. The ledge gradually narrowed from 2 feet to barely 7 inches wide, forcing him to lean outward with his back against the canyon wall. The backcountry hiker watched as Paul paused at the narrowest section, appearing to force a nervous chuckle about living on the edge, before continuing forward along the crumbling path. Likely realizing he'd reached a dead end, Paul attempted to reverse course on the 7-inch ledge. His stiff, unbroken-in boots had no flexibility, the rigid soles unable to feel the polished limestone beneath them. His right foot slipped first, the boot's tread finding no purchase on the smooth rock surface worn down by centuries of wind and water erosion. Paul's arm shot out instinctively, grabbing at the canyon wall. The soft limestone crumbled under his fingers like chalk, offering no hold. His left foot kicked frantically, trying to regain the ledge, but the weight of his backpack pitched him backward into empty air. For 6 full seconds, Paul fell through open space, his body rotating head over heels as gravity accelerated him toward the rocks below. The backcountry hiker heard one sharp shout, then nothing. Paul's body tumbled violently, limbs flailing unnaturally as he fell through open space. He impacted a jagged projection, approximately 200 feet down, the sound echoing across the canyon like a gunshot. His body continued rolling another 50 feet before coming to rest on a narrow shelf. The backcountry hiker immediately radioed park rangers at 11:47 in the morning. The technical rescue team arrived in approximately 40 minutes, rappelling down with ropes and medical equipment. Paul showed no signs of life upon first assessment. The medical examiner's report listed massive blunt force trauma to the head and chest, multiple compound fractures throughout the body, and catastrophic internal bleeding as causes of death. Time of death was estimated at 11:46 in the morning, within seconds of impact. Recovery operations took 4 hours as rangers carefully extracted Paul's body using rope systems. His family was notified that evening. Park officials used the incident to reinforce warnings about unmarked trails and the critical importance of proper equipment and training. It was May 22nd, 2015. The Colorado River carved through the inner canyon, its deceptively smooth surface hiding forces that had claimed lives since humans first dared navigate these waters. James Whitford, a 45-year-old ET specialist from Sacramento, stood at the river's edge, watching sunlight dance across what appeared to be calm water. Within minutes, the river would prove him fatally wrong. James wasn't new to rivers. He'd spent weekends kayaking California's gentler waterways and had completed a handful of guided rafting trips on Class 2 and 3 rapids. Friends described him as confident, sometimes overconfident, with a tendency to dismiss safety briefings as overly cautious. He'd joined a commercial rafting expedition through the Grand Canyon, attracted by the adventure but dismissive of the river's reputation. His wife had encouraged the trip, hoping it would break his monotonous work routine managing network servers for a regional healthcare company. That morning, the group had pulled into a sandy beach along the river, after navigating several moderate rapids. James had handled the morning runs well enough, though his guide noticed he frequently second-guessed instructions. During the lunch break, their guide warned the group not to enter the water in certain sections, where hydraulic holes can trap swimmers in a violent recirculating current that repeatedly drags them underwater. They said that James listened, but seemed unimpressed. The guide had stepped roughly 25 feet away to check a snapped raft line, leaving James temporarily unsupervised. James spotted a section that looked mirror smooth from shore. He removed his life jacket, placing it deliberately on a rock, and stripped down to swim shorts. 2 rafters from his group watched, but didn't intervene, assuming he knew what he was doing. James waded in confidently, the water initially only waist deep. He pushed forward, beginning to swim with strong, practiced strokes. Within 5 strokes, everything changed. The current, moving at nearly 8 miles per hour beneath the calm surface, grabbed him like a powerful hydraulic force, spinning his body in violent turbulence. A fellow rafter named Sarah estimated he traveled roughly 180 feet in about 10 seconds. James's head went under, then resurfaced briefly as he was swept toward a hydraulic hole near the bend. The recirculating feature caught him instantly. His body spun violently, disappearing beneath churning white water, reappearing seconds later in a grotesque tumble, then vanishing again. The hydraulic held him in its grip, rotating him through the churning cycle, like laundry in a washing machine. Sarah screamed for the guide, who reached the shore in time to see James's body surface one final time, face down, arms limp, before the current released him and swept him around the bend. The guide used a commercial VHF radio. Dispatch acknowledged the call at 1:49 p.m., and a Park Service call-out was authorized by 2:10 p.m. 2 rafters launched a kayak in pursuit. They hesitated briefly because of the turbulence, but followed the body's trajectory downstream, unable to reach it before it disappeared into the canyon's next section. Park Service rescue teams mobilized within 30 minutes, deploying search crews along the river corridor. Recovery operations continued for 3 days, hampered by the river's icy temperature, high flow, and complex canyon terrain. James's body was located 2 miles downstream on May 25th, wedged against submerged rocks in a shallow eddy. The medical examiner's report listed drowning as cause of death, with multiple blunt force trauma injuries consistent with violent water turbulence and repeated impact with submerged rocks. Estimated time of death was within 5 minutes of entering the water. The rafting company issued internal safety protocol reminders, but faced no legal action, as James had violated explicit instructions. Park rangers later posted additional warnings along the river corridor about the dangers of swimming in fast-moving sections of the Colorado River. It was May 27, 2016, at the Bright Angel Trailhead on Grand Canyon's south rim, where early tourists crowded near the canyon's edge before the heat arrived. A man crouched with a juniper stick to move a coiled rattlesnake and never made it home. Kurt Bellamy, 38, worked as a small equipment mechanic outside Denver, mostly servicing skid steers, trenchers, and small excavators used by landscaping crews and utility contractors. The work kept him outdoors more than most shop mechanics. He spent long stretches at construction yards and equipment depots scattered along Colorado's Front Range, often stepping around scrap lumber, irrigation piping, and sun-warmed gravel lots where snakes occasionally turned up. He had grown up clearing fence lines on his uncle's cattle property near Pueblo, where rattlesnakes were common and sometimes turned up under feed troughs or irrigation culverts. Bellamy had handled them and said so often, usually describing it as something routine from those summers working pasture repairs. He wasn't a practiced hiker. The Arizona trip was a long weekend with co-worker Martin Keene, 41, who had been talking for months about seeing the canyon in person after a supplier conference brought them both within driving distance. Their plan was loose: walk part of Bright Angel Trail before the midday heat, take photos, and be back in town by the afternoon. Bellamy carried no trail gear and no emergency equipment. At 9:10 a.m., a 4-foot Grand Canyon pink rattlesnake lay coiled in the shade at the base of the trailhead signboard, pressed against the post on cooler ground. Several hikers had already noticed it and were keeping their distance along the edge of the trailhead clearing. Bellamy picked up a juniper stick and told the group he would move it before someone was hurt. Lydia, a retired biology teacher from Tucson, standing roughly 12 feet away, told him directly to leave it alone. Bellamy crouched within 2 feet of the snake and prodded it near the tail. The snake tightened its coil and lifted the tail as the rattle accelerated into a dry, buzzing warning. He prodded again near the mid-body. The strike was immediate. Lydia later told rangers the snake barely appeared to move. Bellamy's left hand jerked backward. 2 fang punctures were visible within seconds between his thumb and index finger, both bleeding. The surrounding tissue began swelling within minutes. A nearby visitor flagged a park ranger walking the rim trail. The ranger examined the wound and radioed dispatch recommending medical evacuation. Bellamy refused on cost grounds and said he felt fine. He and Keene began descending the trail. At 0.7 miles below the rim, uphill hikers found Bellamy seated on a trailside rock, while Keene wrapped his hand with a bandana. The swelling had moved past the wrist. He was sweating and complained of nausea and dizziness. At 1.3 miles from the rim, he collapsed onto the trail. His arm was swollen to the elbow, his face pale gray, his breathing shallow. Keene could not rouse him. Keene flagged a passing hiker carrying a satellite messenger who contacted park dispatch at 11:32 a.m. Rangers reached Bellamy approximately 48 minutes later. He was unconscious with intermittent breathing. A helicopter transported him to a regional hospital in Flagstaff, arriving roughly 2 hours after he collapsed. Antivenom was administered on arrival, but organ failure had already advanced due to the treatment delay. Renal failure developed during the progression of the systemic collapse. Bellamy died 31 hours after the bite. Park officials issued a brief seasonal advisory against approaching or relocating snakes on park trails. The incident was logged in the annual Park Incident Report and received limited regional news coverage. Keene gave a statement to rangers and left that afternoon. No policy changes followed, and the trailhead resumed normal traffic the following morning. It was June 14th, 2016. The South Rim at Pipe Creek Vista shimmered under afternoon heat that could kill as efficiently as any fall. And by day's end, Hector Villalobos would discover both truths in the worst possible sequence. Hector wasn't reckless by nature, just overfamiliar. The 28-year-old landscape photographer from Tucson had hiked the Grand Canyon's trails dozens of times, capturing sunrise shots and dramatic rim perspectives for his growing portfolio. He'd built a modest following on social media, showcasing Arizona's landscapes, earning enough through print sales and local gallery exhibitions to supplement his part-time work at a photography supply store. Friends described him as talented but casual, the kind of person who'd hike in sandals because he knew the terrain. For this climb, he wore worn hiking boots and gripped natural handholds along the pillar, relying entirely on his experience rather than any protective equipment. That morning, Hector had posted on social media about his plan to climb a pillar at Pipe Creek Vista for an unobstructed lunch view. A climber reportedly saw him arrive at the pullout around 11:30 in the morning, carrying only his camera bag, a sandwich, and a half-empty water bottle. The temperature was already 94 degrees and climbing. In summer, the Grand Canyon's inner gorge can exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit, with rock surfaces heating far beyond that. Under those conditions, dehydration can set in quickly. A couple eating lunch at a picnic table near the parking area watched Hector scale the pillar using natural handholds. The ascent took roughly 8 minutes. The pillar's summit was flat enough to sit, perhaps 6 feet across, surrounded by sheer drops on 3 sides. They observed him settle in, unpack his lunch, and appeared to be eating while checking his camera. The couple finished their meal over the next 20 minutes, discussing their afternoon plans, occasionally glancing at the pillar where Hector remained visible as a small figure against the sky. When they looked again, at 12:45 in the afternoon, Hector was gone. The woman initially assumed he'd climbed down while they weren't watching, but something about the empty pillar troubled her. Her husband walked to the edge of the viewing area and scanned downward, seeing nothing unusual. They returned to their car, dismissing the concern. 15 minutes later, a hiker on the rim trail below the vista heard what she initially mistook for a rockfall. Moving around a switchback, she encountered Hector's body sprawled across an angular slab of limestone 30 feet from the pillar's base. His limbs were positioned unnaturally, his head angled wrong. Blood pooled beneath his skull where it had struck the rock. The body lay unbraced, arms at his sides rather than extended defensively. The hiker immediately called emergency services at 1:02 in the afternoon, her voice shaking as she described the scene. Park rangers and emergency medical technicians arrived within 20 minutes, hiking down the nearby switchback trail to reach the body. The medical examiner's report noted multiple skull fractures consistent with high-impact blunt force trauma, along with fractured ribs and internal bleeding. No defensive injuries appeared on his hands or arms. Core body temperature at recovery suggested severe hyperthermia. The determination concluded he had likely lost consciousness from heat stroke while seated on the pillar, then toppled forward during the resulting collapse, falling 40 feet and landing unbraced on the uneven rock surface. Death occurred on impact. The park's ranger station logged the incident as an accidental fatality related to heat exposure and unauthorized climbing. The incident prompted rangers to reinforce existing warnings about off-trail climbing and extreme heat exposure. Park signage warning against off-trail climbing was noted in the report, highlighting that Hector had ignored official guidance. Hector's camera, recovered with his body, contained his final photos: lunch, sky, canyon views. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here.